Shabbat Shalom. When I began rabbinical school, one of the first pieces of advice I received for thriving and surviving the long and challenging journey of rabbinical formation was to trust the process. As it turns out, most of my classmates got the same advice. The phrase, trust the process, became almost ubiquitous, a life meme of sorts that was invoked in moments of challenge and in expressions of irony. I'll be honest, in moments of fatigue and stress, I can snark with the best of them. And this phrase often left my lips. But you know what? I really did trust the process. Not because I necessarily believed that anyone was looking out for me, or that education is an inherently positive endeavor, or that finally becoming a rabbi would make all the work worthwhile. I do believe these things, but they were not my primary motivation for trusting the process. I trusted because I am an inherently optimistic person. And I really needed to trust the process. I don't think I'm alone in having an optimistic outlook. Deb Ellis, the former assistant dean for public service at the NYU School of Law, wrote in a 2011 blog post that was published by the Barack Obama White House. She wrote, Martin Luther King Jr. reminded us that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Change takes a long time, but it does happen. Each of us who works for social change is part of the mosaic of all who work for justice. Together, we can accomplish multitudes. And if we look at the history of the United States, we can see how the arc described by Dr. King has indeed bent towards justice and towards progress. Our nation started with white land-owning men making up the entire voting franchise. But with hard work, the vote was gained by Black Americans, then by women, and now every citizen of the United States has the same right to exercise their vote at the ballot box. For generations, older Americans often sank into poverty as they were no longer able to work to support themselves. The Social Security Act of 1935 created an ingenious safety net as workers pay into a system that will offer them financial support during their later years or in the event of disability. The Social Security scheme is not without its problems and its challenges. But what was once seen as a radical step towards socialism, that's what they said about it in the 1930s. Well, it's now entirely normal as most people see it. Similarly, the Medicaid and Medicare Act, actually it's the other way around, the Medicare and Medicaid Act of 1965 ensured that the older adults and those living in poverty would have access to health care. And the Affordable Care Act of 2010 extended healthcare access even further. There are many problems to solve and much work to be done, but without a doubt, Americans have made amazing progress in creating a safety net for our most vulnerable citizens and towards ensuring that all people have access to at least basic medical care. We can see Dr. King's vision of the bending arc. It is real. And one more example of progress, and this one is more personal. When I was born, LGBTQ people were classified by the psychiatric establishment as mentally ill and in many states as criminals. In my lifetime, the American Psychiatric Association has reversed its position. The Supreme Court declared laws criminalizing same-sex relationships as unconstitutional, and in the 2015 decision by the Supreme Court, equal access for marriage was granted to everyone in the land. And a year later, my beloved and I stood under the chuppah with a ketubah and a marriage certificate. I remember the years of fighting for change, and in 2 weeks, we will hear on this bema from Harriet Miller and Monica Worley, whose lives were at the front line of this fight. And my friends, optimism in the creation of justice where injustice exists is an intrinsic aspect of our Jewish tradition. Last week, Isabella Wallet taught us beautifully from the book of Numbers about the daughters of Zelophehad, who raised an injustice, their inability to inherit land when their father died, to Moses. Moses took their cause to God. And God said the law must be changed to permit them to inherit the land. This is an amazing story of agency and chutzpah on the part of these women. And it is also an amazing story of how Judaism can evolve in order to create more justice through no less than God changing God's mind. Yes, for these and for many more reasons, I believe in progress. I trust the process. But I know, and I think we all know, that Dr. King's description of the moral universe as a long arc bending towards justice can feel at times a little more aspirational than real. Let's look again at our history. Black Americans gained the right to vote, and almost immediately, Jim Crow laws established ridiculous and unjust barriers to voting. The solution, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, restored progress towards justice, but as I talked about last week, the Supreme Court has been dismantling the law. There has been incredible progress towards equality for women, but we have not been able to adopt a constitutional amendment declaring that all people are equal on the basis of sex. And the Me Too movement shows the depth of injustice in a world where too many men still exert power and control over women. And on and on. We make progress only to have justice averted. As it turns out, we can see this in Torah as well. My colleague, Rabbi Carol Balin, writes regarding the daughters of Zelophehad. Moses makes their case before God, and lo and behold, their demands are met. The daughters receive a divine promise that the land will stay in their family for perpetuity. But the startling triumph of biblical women's rights does not last long. Male relatives challenge the divine ruling in this week's double portion, Parashat Matot-Masei. They fear that they will be shortchanged should Zelophehad's daughters intermarry with those of another tribe. So God decrees that the daughters may marry anyone they wish, provided they marry into a clan of their father's tribe of Manasseh. Not a lot of latitude here. As Rabbi Hera Person has observed, by marrying the first cousins, the daughters will essentially hand over their inheritance to the same men who would have received the land had they not stood up for themselves in the first place. Does trusting the process when the daughters of Zelophehad are awarded the right to inherit their family land also require trusting the process when God decrees that the daughters can marry only within the clan of their father? Must we trust that justice will ultimately prevail? I don't have an answer to these questions, and that troubles me. But remember when I said that I'm an optimistic person? Yeah, I still am. I trust that the process of creating justice looks much more like Dr. King's arc of the moral universe than it does a roller coaster, if you look at it from the right perspective. I believe with all my heart that the moral universe does arc towards justice. It is the actions of the justice makers, the peacemakers, of ordinary people, of you and of me, that hammers the arc into shape, that smooths out the loops and turns around the reversals. Even when God mysteriously decrees an outcome that appears to work against justice, human beings made in God's image retain the free will to work for a just world. We are even commanded to do just that. So I trust the process. I believe in a moral universe that is shaped to bring all of us to justice. I trust all of you, all of us, to keep working. Shabbat Shalom.